Welcome to the AI Journal podcast. Today we're joined by two amazing people from Shell that we're looking to interview. We are joined by Sabine and Dan, and it's great to have you on the show. Can you give us a little bit about yourselves and what you're doing here at Web Summit?
Great, thanks guys. So I'm Sabine Brink and I lead Shell's global blockchain team. And we're really housed here to accelerate blockchain technology across the energy sector. And for me being here at Web Summit, it's been amazing just to meet all the different startups that are here, talk about new partnerships, discover all the new tech going on. And I'm really happy to see that crypto is actually already such a big theme this year. So great to see that.
Yeah, it's amazing. Crypto and climate.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
We'll check if you've invested later on.
And I'm Dan. I'm the IT CTO at Shell. So my role is that I look at all things from blockchain right through to AI, also computational science, mixed reality. But really what this is all about is using next generation digital technology to help drive the energy transition. And that's what we're all focused on as a team.
Love it. And where would you say then, with Shell going forward, what's the kind of bigger picture and the vision that you've got at the moment with bringing these new technologies in, looking at things like sustainability? It's been touched on at Web Summit, very important topics. I'll come to you first, where would you see it, Dan? Where would you see this going for the next 5 years with Shell?
Well, I think just to kind of back up, I think the key thing is if you look at society as a whole, we've got an urgent problem, which is we have to rapidly transform our energy system.
Yeah.
Which is an absolutely massive challenge.
Yeah.
And maybe just to put that in perspective for your listeners, and I used this stat a few times because I think it's quite effective. We ran an experiment in 2020 in which we stopped flying and stopped driving for about 6 months. And the total impact of that on CO2 emissions globally was about 6% reduction.
Incredible. Yeah.
Now, if you look at that, that is crazy when it comes to how much we have to change in order to really radically overhaul the entirety of our energy backbone. Yeah. And that's going to take everybody. There's no silver bullets. It's going to take a lot of different technologies. But I believe that digital and AI and blockchain have key roles to play. And the reason I say that is that ultimately what you have to see in the energy transition is that the energy system as it is today can use these technologies to run much more efficiently.
Yeah.
Both actually in terms of just operational cost, which is a business problem, but also most importantly from a CO2 impact perspective. The second thing is in the energy system of the future, it's going to be much more distributed, as we know in the blockchain space. Yeah. It's going to be much more diverse. It's going to be much more requiring optimization in order to allow us to truly operate this sort of complex, diverse system that we're going to have. Yeah. And digital is going to be fundamental to that. And so I think as Shell, what we're trying to do is leverage all of these technologies in an integrated way to try to fundamentally transform the digital energy system, which has a material impact on the physical.
Yeah. And where would that tie in then with you? Because I love that answer and I can just love the passion for it as well, of what's happening and where you're going and the kind of picture you've got. How does blockchain play into it, Sabine? What's the deal there? What's going on?
Yeah. Well, interestingly, I think blockchain is actually really fundamental to everything that Dan has just outlined. Just to give you a bit of a picture of how we started this, we actually already started looking at blockchain as early as 2016, where we started out with different proof of concepts, developing our strategy, trying to educate Shell, but also the energy industry as a whole as to what is this foundational technology and what positive impact can it actually have on the energy industry. And that has actually led us now to a point these years later to be able to say, well, if we look at the energy industry today, and Dan has brilliantly outlined it, I like to say we need to re-architect it. There's so many new energy resources coming into the system. There's many more customers, there's more unique customer needs. And the overall ambition of that energy system is that we decarbonize at high speeds. Yeah. Now, blockchain being a very fundamental open technology allows us to create a much more transparent and much more traceable energy system. And I think that is a key underlying requirement when you have a more distributed and decentralized energy system. Blockchain provides a perfect, let's say, underlying paradigm to be able to enable that for the future. So I see, our group and the blockchain CoE as actually being fundamental to achieving a lot of the things that are outlined for us to accelerate in the energy transition.
When you're looking at blockchain, and you were talking about more transparent, more traceable, you've a ton of different energy sources now. So renewable, you still got fuel, still got coal powered stations, and. Are you talking about every ounce of energy that comes in from major corporations, me at home giving you back energy, whatever else, you're trying to track and trace that. What is that information going to be used for once it's tracked and traced?
Yeah.
Who looks at it and what are they going to do with it?
Yeah, let me give you an example of that, because it's personally one of my favorite use cases that we're looking at this across the group. And I think, to date, if you look at the energy world at the moment, you buy, hopefully, or maybe green electricity at home. Yeah. But you say you purchase green electricity, but how do you know actually where that energy is coming from? Or how are you sure that that energy is actually green, even though it gets mixed up in the energy grid, for example? How does that trace back to you to ensure that those green attributes that you're buying actually come to you? Same thing is now with new energy products like hydrogen. Hydrogen can be produced in a really sustainable way and can help us really decarbonize the energy sector, but it can also be produced in a less sustainable way. Now, those kind of differentiations in those energy products, I think as a consumer, large corporates or even smaller consumers, you have the right, but also you want to know the granularity of data where your energy comes from. And you want to be sure that the green hydrogen that you're buying is actually that green hydrogen. Yeah. So blockchain there provides just a way of a verified data exchange across the industry to allow all these actors and players that need to exchange this data to provide you that clarity, to exchange it and to verify it from the origin. Oh, wow. And those are the kind of projects we're working on at the moment.
I think just to build on that, the way we put this is that there's going to be many shades of green. and the reason for that is it's a serious point, because there's a reason that for some customers, there's an economic barrier to going to full renewable. Our CEO today was talking on stage, and he talked about the fact that we can produce the sustainable aviation fuel today. The problem is it's 3 times the cost. Yeah. And many companies aren't willing to pay that. And so the challenge is going to be this economic balance between how sustainable you're willing to go and what can you afford. Yeah. And therefore, you're going to need to be able to have a variety of different products on the market, which are different shades of green. Yeah. And you're going to need a way of assuring that, just as Sabine's outlined.
Yeah. But those products aren't just going to be the only thing, to go back to what you mentioned earlier on, Dan, that's going to technically save the economy. What are you doing in the tech space then? What's all the digital tooling that you've got to allow you to be more efficient or allow the corporations that you deal with? If you could give us some examples of that.
Yeah, and I think, for me, it's really important to say that for us, it has to be a both and. We've got to be able to do some of the things that Sabine is talking about, which are, if you like, the hallmarks of the new energy system, as well as the optimization, which we haven't touched on yet, but also in the current energy system. We're going to have a footprint today that is heavily based on hydrocarbons for some time to come. Whether we like it or not, we would like to go faster, we really would, but it's challenging. And so what we have to be able to do is to make that as effective and efficient as we possibly can and minimize the CO2 footprint. And so we're using AI very broadly across the whole of Shell, really, to look at a variety of approaches. But one particular approach that we're using a lot is optimization. So how can you leverage advanced optimization methods to actually reduce the CO2 footprint of assets today? Yeah. Also, how can you use AI to measure the CO2 footprint and even methane footprint of assets today? And so we're doing a lot of work in those areas. And maybe I shared this example a couple of times, but one recent example that I find particularly powerful, which gives an idea of what AI can do to the heavy industrial sector, is we deployed a single algorithm to one of our LNG trains in Nigeria. And what that was able to do is reduce the CO2 footprint of that particular asset by about 130 kilotons.
It's incredible. Which is just incredible. And I mean, just to put that in perspective, that's about the equivalent of 57-ish thousand vehicles, European vehicles, important distinction, on the road that we're taking off the road by doing a single algorithm deployment to a single site. And so these sorts of things, the deployment, and we think this is just scratching the surface, the deployment of AI in the existing energy system is really fundamental. It's not necessarily the sexiest thing, but actually it's one of the areas where we're going to have the biggest impact in terms of reducing our CO2 footprint now, which is a key priority. I love it. And I was always saying to Kieran as well, when we do these, and I come from a marketing perspective, how important to optimize and to look at things and to monitor. And that's why I love AI, because it's the best tool that I can use to monitor, and for such important topics like you touched on. That example you gave was incredible. Like, to think that you're taking those kind of cars off the road and bringing all these great ways of using the planet that we've got for a better way. I love it, because it's what will change. So tell me then, how is it how is this communicating this message as part of Shell? Because the speech you did earlier with the Shell CEO, absolutely incredible what they were talking about. How is your team from both sides? I'll start with you, Dan. What are you seeing working with getting this great message across?
Well, I think, you know what, it's actually hard because a lot of people don't want to engage with the dialogue, and they don't want to know that it's difficult.
Yeah.
Because they want the simple answer, and they want it now, and they want it to be solved. And I get that, I really do. I think the challenge is, and you know, it's about being brave, right? I think we've got a great message to put out there.
Yeah.
You know, I wake up every day and I say, look, we have the opportunity to use digital technology to transform the energy system.
Yeah.
And you're better off doing that from the inside than from the outside.
Yeah.
And that's why I work for Shell, because if you look at where the data is, which is what we need for AI, as you know, Tom, Shell has a vast array of energy data built up over 100 and odd years of history that I can leverage in order to find ways to optimize the energy system. And provided I can look at myself with integrity and say that is what I'm about, then I'm super motivated to do that. And this is why we do things like this and why we're at Web Summit, because I think there are many people out there like us who want to get involved in these types of problems, who want to have a real impact. And you can have a choice in technology. You can either count lots of web clicks, or you can focus on things that really matter,
100%.
which is about trying to transform the energy system using these sort of forms of technology.
I absolutely love it. And that's such a good answer, because literally how we always think about things with AI Journal is looking at it from what's going to give the best user experience. And it's not always the sexiest topics, as you said. Some things people misunderstand. So I'd love to come to you as well. What would you say, Sabine, with that same kind of question, but for the blockchain area? Because ultimately, it's not one of my hotspots. Kieran's obviously a lot hotter on it than myself. Where would you say that's kind of relaying these awesome messages of what Shell's doing and transforming the world? What would you say?
Yeah, really good one. I think, also just for me personally, I think if I look at Shell as a company, before I started working here, I never knew the amounts of work that is ongoing within digital innovation, computational sciences. And I think I've literally just been struck when joining the company as to the breadth and the size and the amount of teams that are working on this. So to be honest, looking at ourselves, I think we can do an even better job at sharing what we're doing and communicating, sharing, what's working well, what are the challenges in implementing this. I think there's a lot of people and communities that can benefit from this. So from that perspective, it's been an eye-opener for me as well in joining this company. I think so, just focusing purely on blockchain, right? I think we're in a unique moment. And I think if you ask anyone in the team working on blockchain in Shell, we really feel this, this is our moment to provide that change within the energy industry, and it's really happening now. And we're kind of in the 1994 era of before the internet went mainstream. And that's a great moment. And I think what we've been trying to do is, we're really focusing on building systems that we can actually implement. We're not just a POC factory that just rolls them out. We're really focusing on getting blockchain implemented in the energy industry at large. So what I tried to do and enable the team and everyone working with us, it's all about partnerships at the moment. It's all about getting the right people at the table talking, sharing our experiences in creating those partnerships. And also really trying to build open source communities that we can leverage and then we contribute to alongside that, because in basis blockchains is everything about open source, about open communities, creators, economies that are emerging, and we need to leverage and engage with external communities even more than we're doing internally.
100%.
I love that, because it was interesting. I was listening to Insurance Talk earlier on. I can't remember the name of the company, or I'll not name them on the podcast, interrupt Shell's name on it, but they weren't trying to do everything themselves. They have a rich data set of data, but their description was they move slowly internally. So what they were doing is creating innovation competitions and opening up the drawbridge of the doors to allow other people in to help them do it. To your question earlier on, Dan, you mentioned both and, because people do in the service industry, they want simple answers to problems. And very often they don't actually accept that there maybe isn't a simple answer. But what you're describing there is you're not digitally transforming the organization overnight and leaving everything behind. You're getting the wins now, and then Sabine and the team are also reaching into the future using blockchain, using AI algorithms. You're having your cake and eating it, but in the most effective way. That sound about right.
I think I always talk about the and story, right? And I think for me, it's really, you have to have capability, because otherwise there's no way we can have a conversation. If you're not building anything of value, you've got nothing to bring to a conversation. And so we've built a very successful community of professionals like Sabine and others who are deep experts in their fields, be that computational science, the application of physics and chemistry to the energy industry and using high performance computing, be that deep learning capabilities or blockchain. We've built teams in all of those areas which are focused on the toughest problems in the energy sector. And that's something we're really proud of. But there's also another, as an and to that, which is, and you have to take the rest of the company with you. Because if you don't take the company with you, you will never make the change that you're trying to drive.
And that knowledge gap in the training.
Exactly. And so we've built a community around the digital transformation in Shell. We call it the Shell.ai community, which is about 5,000 people now. And we're using that to basically enable and empower the community to also do some of these things themselves. So if you can build a simple model, do it. If you can launch a token and it's useful, do it. But we're trying to enable those types of things within those communities for sensible use cases. And then the final thing is there's another and within that. And the and is we also need to make sure that we partner well. Because we can't ignore the external ecosystem. So I mentioned earlier on today, we've announced today we're going to invest 1.4 billion in startups in the coming 6 years. And that's a fantastic statement of intent, saying we want to partner well. And of course, I was on stage earlier on with Kongsberg and with Databricks, and also we've announced a partnership with Microsoft around how we can leverage their technology to accelerate our own journey. So it's very much that and I think you have to do it all. You can't do one piece of it if you want to be successful in this.
And in terms of, I love the way you say you're bringing organisations in and you're spending time talking about this. What about the naysayers around the industry, who will always challenge, saying, but you're not doing enough, or, you've been around for 100 years as a vested interest thing. How would you challenge that?
I'd love to get Sabine's view on this. I think this is one of the hardest things, actually. I mean, I think all of us who've done this have been heckled, have been challenged, have had trolling on the internet. And I think you just have to accept that if you're trying to do the right thing, not everyone's going to agree with you.
100%.
And I think what I try to do is focus on positive energy. Probably tell that from the way I talk.
Comes across.
I'm excited about what we're trying to do. I believe in it. And you know what? Not everyone's going to agree with me. And that's okay. But I'm hopeful that we can take a community with us that do believe in it. And I'm hopeful, and actually this is my motivation, I want to be able to look my kids in the eye and say, I did what I could. And I think that's all you can do. I don't think it's a too big problem for any one person to solve. But I think if we commit to it and we have integrity about that and we put passion and energy and enthusiasm and we try and take people with us, I think that's all you can do.
I love it.
I was going to say, I love that statement. Everybody has their part to play, because the corollary of that is that people look to big corporations to fix everything for them, whereas we've each got individual responsibility to try and actually do something.
I love it. I was just going to see what your view as well was, Sabine, because I'd love to know how you're viewing it.
Well, to be honest, I think always, people that are critical, in any case, on our energy system, on climate change, on energy transition, to be honest, I think it's a really good thing. I think it's actually the fact that so many people around the world are starting the conversation, are getting causes, roots up, are really trying to create movements, are feeling emotions, are, because it impacts every single one of us. It impacts our future generations. It impacts us today. For my generation, this is the pressing thing that 100%. You want to be a part of to solve. And I think that kind of anger or criticism is actually an effect of that emotion of the importance of what we need to solve with this. So from my perspective, what I just try and do for me personally is I think, where could I have the most impact at this moment in time with the knowledge or with the passion that I have, and try and create an effect that is bigger than what I could do in isolation somewhere else or by joining a different company or starting something. So for me, it's always that go out and test, and on the one hand, recognizing that it is the biggest challenge we have at the moment and that those emotions are valid. But then what are we going to do about it? And I feel like that's where I need to be at this moment.
I love it. Because it's so in line with what we think and what we do, things like you're talking about leveraging partnerships and getting people included and making sure it's a community effort, which I love because that's how we look at things. But also, to your point, Dan, when you were looking at it of people ask us all the time, oh, but isn't AI going to take my job? Or all these, we class them as silly, because I just think it's not forward thinking. Like, ask you what you're going to have for dinner in 2 weeks. I don't know, but I know it's going to be something that's going to be positive, and it's going to be something that it's the same with a business. And I love that you've got that approach with Shell and you're building that kind of culture around it. So,
yeah, and I think, just as you say, I think that the key thing is, don't get me wrong, we have to be careful and we have to be thoughtful about the way in which we implement it. But I think AI is just like any other technology. Same with blockchain. We can either harness it for good and make a societal impact for the right reasons and leverage it in the right ways with the right controls and the right assurance and the right thinking around how we do that. Or we can see it used for all sorts of ills that aren't necessarily where we want to go. And I think with any technology we have that choice. I think it's a particularly powerful choice right now. And again, coming back to the central point, what I'm advocating for really is that I hope there's many startups and there's many innovators that are listening to your podcast come away from this and think, I'd like to work in energy. Because I think that's where I can have an impact with my skill set.
100%.
And that's what I'd love to see, because I think if we put our efforts in this space into leveraging these technologies now to solve this problem, it's going to benefit everybody.
So if we're sitting here in 3 years' time, just what would you have hoped would have happened from all this work, all this exceptional work that you and Shell are doing?
That is a great question. I'm also going to ask Sabine this as well. It's a great question. I think for me, what would I like to see? We're building a very, very large power business. We already have the largest electrolyzer in the world, I learned today. I think we're building the largest again. So we're building these assets very, very quickly. I hope that we will have a scaled example of the digital energy system with AI, blockchain, mixed reality, digital twin, edge IoT at its core, that we can demonstrate to society and say, this is what good looks like. And I hope that is replicated elsewhere as well, because actually society needs to move quicker. And so I think that's what I hope we'll see.
Yeah, from our perspective, I think, with blockchain, we've really made a lot of way over the last, let's say, 10 years. But on the other hand, it's still nascent technology, and there's still so much to do. So if I say in 3 years' time, I would love if we have a dedicated, huge stage here, which is crypto and climate and everything to do with NFTs, DeFi, that it attracts the best ecosystem from Europe, because I think in Europe we have a lot to offer with crypto decentralization that I think we should harness and we should do more about in bringing startups here. So to me, it would be having a dedicated area here, which is just focused on this, more prime time, stage time for crypto and DeFi. And indeed having just concrete examples that we can demonstrate that have actually had an impact on climate. And I think that's the main thing that I personally will hold myself accountable to, coming back in, let's say, 3 years' time, to hope that we've been successful.
We'll write this down and come back.
Gosh.
So for people who want to find out a little bit more about Shell, the excellent work that you're doing, find out a little bit more about you as individuals, or connect into this startup ecosystem, how would they go about doing that?
Great question. So a lot of it is on our website. So hopefully you can see the link somewhere.
We'll post it in the show notes, everything that you want.
So we have a whole bunch of content on our website around digital, around AI, around blockchain. We also publish a lot of blogs. So we're blogging regularly. I've just recently put some out on LinkedIn. Probably put the links to those as well, talking about all the different things we're doing, from computational science to AI to open source to blockchain. And so I think there's a lot there. The other thing, just a shameless plug, we'd love, we're looking for talent. We want people who want to come work with us. And we also have something called the AI residency program, which we've launched now in 4 global locations.
That's awesome.
And we're trying to bring in the best AI talent to work in the energy sector. So have a look at that and check out the AI residency if you want to come and start working with us. And also feel free to, Sabine and I are both active on LinkedIn. Follow us. We're constantly putting out content, and you can keep up to date with what we're up to.
Love it. We'll put that in the show notes as well. And it's been awesome to have you on the show. It's really opened my eyes to what we're doing, and really do appreciate the time that you've taken with us today, Dan and Sabine. Massive thank you. Great to have you.
Thanks so much to have us.
It's been awesome.
Thank you so much.